Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're going to continue retrospective gaming in the 90s, where I take a look at every single year in 1990 through 1999 and pick my favorite and most influential game for that year. It should be painfully obvious we're playing Sonic the Hedgehog, released in 1991. And it is absolutely wild to think that before this game came out, there was not a Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Now Sonic as a character is known the world over, rivaling Mario and Mickey Mouse as far as mascot noticeability is concerned. And I will say right now, I was all about Super Mario World and Nintendo in 1990, but when I saw Sonic the Hedgehog in motion at the mall on a demo kiosk in 1991, I 100% became a Sega fan and a Sega diehard for the 16-bit generation. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But in 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog was everything that Mario was not. It was faster, it had more attitude, it had different gameplay styles. Of course it was the same genre, a 16-bit platformer, because those were all the rage in the early to mid-90s, but it did absolutely everything differently. This was a Sega developed game, and Sega had a certain playstyle that you wouldn't see anywhere else. Even these special stages here with the rotational effects just felt like something that was absolutely brand new, unique, and you had never seen before, even if obviously the Super Nintendo can scale things and rotate them a lot better than the Sega Genesis could. And there was just something about the bright, cheery nature of Sonic the Hedgehog and the absolute speed in which you could scroll the screen that felt like you were playing something that was never possible on Super Nintendo. So much so that Sega even came up with the marketing scheme a little bit later on about blast processing and how that improved the overall speed performance of the Sega Genesis, and even had the Sega Does What Nintendo Don't Add campaign. Sega was just positioning Sonic the Hedgehog and the Sega Genesis as being the absolute polar opposite of what the Super Nintendo was, and for a lot of people they absolutely bought into that. We now know that blast processing, while technically a real aspect of the hardware, was not doing what Sega was talking about whatsoever, and as far as Sega Does What Nintendo Don't, they definitely made different types of games and different feeling games, but honestly it's pretty par as far as hardware is concerned. But let's like we talk about Sonic the Hedgehog, the idea that Eggman here, or Dr. Robotnik as he was known, first appeared in this level as a boss fight. These are characters that are now iconic. Movie franchises, comic books, cartoons. You can travel to the farthest edges of the earth and still see stuff for Sonic the Hedgehog. So much so that my wife and I were in India for our honeymoon, walking around markets. There was more bootleg Sonic the Hedgehog merchandise than any other character, and there was kids walking around with Sonic backpacks. Kids that were like 3 to 4 years old that probably had no idea what Sonic the Hedgehog actually was outside of this merchandise. As we move into the Marble Zone here, this is just one of the most iconic levels in Sonic the Hedgehog as far as I'm concerned, and it's all just down to the overall backgrounds that kind of felt a little bit like they were borrowed from Altered Beast, but mostly for me the absolute iconic track, which I'll let you listen to in a moment. This song, this level is burned into my brain from being a kid because it definitely gave me a lot of hell back in the day. I would absolutely fall a lot in the lava, but you need to remember I was underneath 10 years old when I got my Sega Genesis and this game, so my gaming skills weren't exactly up to par, but I remember playing this level over and over again and just loving the fact that I could keep playing this in my house even if I was dying over and over. And even today when I play this game, this level still hits. Now this hasn't held up as well as something like Super Mario World. If you want to play what in my opinion is the best 2D Sonic game of the Genesis, you want to play Sonic 2, but the original is still a ton of fun, and again, launched a worldwide franchise that is still going strong. And sure, the most recent Sonic games haven't been hits. This is definitely a franchise that has been struggling for some years now, but when this game first came out, it was a cultural phenomenon, sold an absolute metric crap ton of copies as well. But this song, 10 out of 10, listen, and I'll be right back. That track is just an iconic part of my childhood, and I'm sure it's nostalgia talking, but I still consider it to be the best piece of music ever made in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. And honestly, 50 years from now, I could be on my deathbed, or at least I hope it's going to be 50 years, and if someone said hum this song from the second level of Sonic the Hedgehog, I could be able to do that any day of the week and twice on Sundays. And that's just how important this game was. But again, you really have to think about it. You've probably grown up in a world where Sonic the Hedgehog has either always existed or came out in your lifetime. Maybe you weren't alive in 1991, maybe you weren't playing games yet, but honestly, Sonic the Hedgehog has just been with us for generations now, and that is just an absolutely insane thing to think about. But this was a game that just had to come out, and 1991 was its year of release, and do be aware that all of the videos in this series I'm basing on the North American release date and when I would have first encountered them. This was just the anti-Mario, and that's not to say that Super Mario World isn't an incredible game in and of itself, it absolutely is, but Sega wanted to do something that felt similar to Nintendo while also having its own personality. Sonic had more attitude, he had more speed, he had a different gameplay style, and it hit every bit as much as Super Mario World did in 1990. And again, a lot of what is still in the franchise today was introduced in this game, and I think that's why I really love talking about this one. Think about if you had created something that the entire world knew. So many artists in their lifetime create works, but they're only actually recognized for them after they're dead. Think about all the great masters and all of the artwork hanging in any sort of museum. 99 out of 100 of those artists were only discovered after their death, and they never actually got to live to see their fame. But obviously, the team of developers and creatives at Sega that created Sonic the Hedgehog went on to see just what their work actually affected, and that must be one of the most insane feelings around. I don't know about you, but I always want to do one thing in life that the world will remember in a positive way, so the idea of Sega creating Sonic the Hedgehog and this being his first outing just is one of those lightning in a bottle sort of situations. They decided to make a game, they hoped it would stick, and now today in 2025, Sonic the Hedgehog is still one of the biggest mascots the world has ever seen. Think of it this way, Shigeru Miyamoto creates Mario, Yuji Naka creates Sonic, and they still live and inhabit our world to this day. That is definitely no small feat. And Sonic just exists because Sega in meetings in 89 and 90 wanted something that could rival Nintendo. They needed their own mascot, they needed their own platform game, and they decided to sit down and brainstorm and come up with their own development ideas for a 2D platformer that played similarly to Mario but also had its own flavor, its own flair, and its own vibe. And what came out of that was Sonic the Hedgehog, a character that we still have today, but again, a character that was first introduced in his first proper game in 1991. So that is why I picked this one as the most influential game of the year. And I honestly think that many people disagree with me here. One more soundtrack taste, another classic, but 30 seconds this time and I'll come back and tell you where the series is going to be heading. But enjoy because it is good. An absolutely iconic track that you'll still hear remixed in some modern Sonic games today. But think of it this way, in 1991, Sega releases a game and it basically launches the character of Sonic the Hedgehog into the mental zeitgeist of basically the entire world. I would be hard pressed to imagine a country in which they don't know Sonic the Hedgehog is a thing. I'm sure you could probably go to North Korea right now and find bootleg Sonic the Hedgehog t-shirts and merchandise at some black market somewhere. And that is not a joke, it is a real thing. And honestly, this is the first time I learned about pinch deaths in Sonic the Hedgehog, and now I fear them to this day. But this was just what I was all about in 1991. When Sonic the Hedgehog came out, when I got a Genesis for Christmas, when I played this game, I absolutely fell in love, and I played every single Sonic game since. And trust me, some years that is not a fun experience. But this was just such a wild thing to see. The difference in gameplay, the physics on the springs here. Sonic felt, controlled, and played unlike Mario, even though you knew it was the exact same genre. And that's why, again, this is my most influential game of 1991. It was a platformer the world fell in love with, and it was a platformer that launched an entire character that is probably going to be around in 100 years. I mean, think about it that way. Unless something catastrophic happens, we will all be long gone, dusted and buried in the ground or cremated, and Sonic the Hedgehog will probably still be out there doing something. There's going to be Sonic the Hedgehog games in 21-25, just like 2025 will have one as well, I'm sure. And that longevity, that lasting power, all came from this one game here. And even now there's better games as far as 2D Sonic the Hedgehog games are concerned, Sonic 2 definitely still being my favorite. This game is so important to the history of gaming, and that's why it's here. See you guys next time. Bye bye.